So in the past 6 or 7 years on YouTube, it has become a lot more common and a lot more popular to cover books in very, very long videos. When I first started on here, you really couldn't find 1 or 2 hour long dissections and analyses of books, but now they're all over the place. And in spite of that, no one seems to have done that with Beautiful Creatures. I mean, tons of people, myself included, have done really long deep dives and thought way too long and hard about books from the late aughts and early 2010s, which by this point are nostalgic for many of us. You know, there's tons of stuff that was popular back then that we've covered, and tons of stuff that was obscure back then that we've covered, and tons of stuff that was somewhere in the middle, but no one seems to have covered Beautiful Creatures like that yet.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
And that's a little bit strange to me because these books were huge back when they first came out. I mean, the first book has over 600,000 ratings on Goodreads, and that is almost unheard of. These books were very big. And in spite of them being very big, no one has talked about them in over 10 years, it seems. And I do have a bit of a theory about that. You see, now that I've finished them, I can say that these books are good. Yeah, they're good. You know, I read them and I went, yeah, I kind of liked that. If they were hilariously bad, then people would see more opportunities to make fun of them. And if they were really great and amazing, then people would still talk about them as being great and amazing. But because they're just good, there are probably a lot of people who read them and went, yeah, I liked that, and then they just moved on. It didn't stick in their minds that much, is what I'm saying. And honestly, I can see why, because even though I do think these books are good, I think they're enjoyable enough, they don't really do anything unique at all. Like, have you read Twilight, or Fallen, or Falling Under, or The Sirena Legacy, or Evermore, or Hush Hush? If you have read any of those, or anything along those lines, you have already read Beautiful Creatures. Sorry, The Castor Chronicles, as the series is called. Beautiful Creatures is the name of the first book. It's a story of a normal teenage girl who meets some sort of supernatural boy, and then they fall in love, and usually there's some sort of magical adventure that they have to go on, and then after they go on that adventure, they get their happily ever after. And Beautiful Creatures is just that, with one difference. In this case, the protagonist is a normal teenage boy who falls in love with a supernatural girl. Also, that supernatural girl might turn evil soon, but we'll get to how that doesn't make much sense later. But despite that switch up, despite that one change, it is still exactly like all of these other bad paranormal young adult romances that were coming out in the late aughts and early 2010s. However, I will say it's more competent than most of them. Like, the authors didn't just follow a formula, they also followed basic writing advice.
What is happening?
There are genuinely things in these books that I liked and that can be enjoyed. Like, the prose, for example, is very fun and it's very easy to read. So even though these books are very long, a lot longer than they need to be, you can get through them pretty easy and quick. I think the premise of the story is very intriguing, although on close inspection it does fall apart. We'll talk about that more as this video goes on. The books take place in the rural American South, and they really, really lean into that Southern Gothic atmosphere, which is kind of cool. The characters in these books are actual characters. They're not just pre-made archetypes. Like, even the ones that are a bit more cliched and the ones where I've seen something like that done before, they all have something to them, and I can see what makes them tick. And they're all likable. Even the villains, who are not supposed to be likable in the traditional sense, but I at least thought they were kind of fun whenever they were around. And the main relationship between the two leads is, alright. You know, it's not stupid, it's not outright abusive or controlling like a lot of them are, it's alright. And perhaps most importantly, one of them is not 1,000 years old and creeping on a minor. You know? It's just two young people who fall in love, and that is weirdly refreshing to see. But in spite of all the stuff in these books that I like, there's plenty of stuff to critique and complain about too. The pacing of these books is a bloody mess. I mean, it's 4 books long, but really it should have been a trilogy. And in the trilogy, each of those books could have been like 15 to 20% shorter without losing much of anything. The world that the story takes place in just straight up does not make sense. Like, the whole setup of dark casters and light casters is never really explained, and none of the characters seem curious about how it works, but we're just supposed to roll with it. There's other stuff to complain about too, but you're not here for me to give vague platitudes. You're here for me to spend way too much time explaining all of this. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I'm the right person to do a full-bore, 2-hour-long deep dive analysis into these books. But no one else is doing it, and I do think they deserve to be critiqued. I think they deserve to be praised for what they do well. So I'm going to do that. And from here on out, there will be full spoilers ahead. Do I recommend Beautiful Creatures? I mean, if the premise really, really grabs you, then I guess check it out. And if you are a really big fan of this genre and this style of book, then maybe check it out. But other than that, I would say, nah, don't read them. Just watch this video instead. Or if you're like me and you're curious about how they fail, it's still not worth it to take the time to read them. Just watch this video instead. Alright, we're going into spoilers now, but before that, a word from this video's sponsor, World Anvil. This video is brought to you by World Anvil. Do you know the worst part of world building? Keeping track of everything. Maps, timelines, outlines, important names, artwork, religious doctrines. There's a lot of important, complicated stuff to remember. That is, if you do it all in your head. That is where World Anvil comes in. World Anvil is the ultimate all-in-one creative platform for game masters, fantasy and science fiction authors, and anyone who loves world building. It has 3 complete tool sets in one: a world building suite, an RPG campaign manager, and a novel writing and publishing tool. It has interactive maps, timelines, family trees, and more. It's actually impressive how much is packed in here. If you're an author, World Anvil gives you plot templates, the ability to drag and drop scenes, and other stuff that helps you prevent pedantic busybodies with too much time on their hands from noticing inconsistencies. If you're an RPG game master, World Anvil has support for over 100 tabletop systems, Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, and that other one you bought the rulebook for and haven't been able to convince your friends to try out yet. World Anvil has them all. Stat blocks, character sheets, interactive maps, and all your lore can be put in a single place. That way you can quickly counter that one player who exploits loopholes in the rules to make himself a god after the first 3 sessions. What are you waiting for? Head to worldanvil.com right now and get started. That's not a request, that's an order. Go. Check out the link in the description and use code JAMES for 51% off a yearly membership. And if you have any sort of setting that you think World Anvil can help you with, tell us about it in the comments below.
Yeah, I'm going to punch you.
You're gonna punch me?
Yes.
And you're gonna get in trouble for that.
Okay.
Beautiful Creatures begins with a totally normal teenage boy named Ethan Waite. He lives in a small town called Gatlin, South Carolina, and when I say it's small, it is tiny, and it is very isolated, and no one new ever comes there, until his sophomore year of high school starts. For the non-Americans, that's his second year of high school. He's around 15 or 16 years old. One morning, he goes to turn on his iPod, and there's a new song on there called 16 Moons that he doesn't remember adding there. And he listens to it and goes, huh, that's kind of weird. But then later, when he tries to go back and find it, the song has disappeared.
That's weird.
In his English class, he meets a new girl, which shocks him because no one new ever comes here, named Lena Duquesne, and that's far from the last amazing name we're going to hear in these books. Lena and Ethan seem to hit it off, and Lena also has magic powers, and it does not take her very long to tell Ethan about having magic powers, and also Ethan takes it remarkably well. Like, he's just very, very accepting of this whole thing. He's like, alright, this new girl who showed up and I have a crush on has magic powers, cool. Lena is what's called a caster, which is basically a wizard or witch. You know, she can do magic things like making it rain or teleport or various other magical related things. I feel it goes without saying, but the magic system here isn't explored a whole lot. Like, the majority of the time when characters are using magic, they're either using it to fight evil supernatural threats, or they're casting curses, or they're trying to undo curses. Anyways, Lena has a number on the back of her hand that counts down every day, and after a while, Ethan learns that she's counting down to her 16th birthday. Because you see, casters are all either claimed for the light or claimed for the dark when they turn 16. And you might think that being claimed for the dark and becoming a dark caster means that you become evil, but no. Lena has relatives who have gone dark, like several of them. Like her aunts and uncles and cousins. She has several relatives that have gone dark, and they're still around. You know, they hang out together, they come to family dinners and stuff. They're just kind of rude now. I guess that's the extent of their dark powers. Oh, and also their eyes turn yellow. But Lena's eyes are green, and it would be so terrible to lose those beautiful green eyes. Anyways, Lena is nervous that she's gonna get claimed for the dark, and over the course of the book we find out that actually she won't just be claimed by the light or the dark, she'll actually get to choose for herself, and most of the book is just her being anxious about that and trying to prepare for that difficult choice. But like, why is it a difficult choice? Shouldn't she just choose to be good and not evil? Just don't think about it. So Lena and Ethan start doing some research about this claiming of the light and dark in a magical library. Now, the entrance to this magical library is hidden in the regular library. And so they go in, and there's this enormous underground tunnel network. And like I said, it's absolutely enormous. It's also magical, and no one is quite sure how far it goes. The library where they do their research is huge, but it's also just one tiny part of this larger tunnel network. We also learned that there are some non-magic people, which non-casters are usually referred to as mortals, and there are some mortals called keepers who record the knowledge and history of the caster world. And Ethan learns that his family's cook, a woman named Amma, is actually a keeper. He also takes that remarkably well. Like, at no point in any of this is Ethan, like, annoyed or upset with her for hiding this information from it. Well, okay, he's a little annoyed with her for a minute, but then he stops caring. Ethan's mom has been dead for a little while before the story begins, but his dad is still around, and throughout the whole series, they do keep all the magic stuff a secret from his dad. But Amma serves as a parental/guardian figure for the kids while they're having dangerous adventures, which is a little different and a little nice to see, you know? Just having any sort of parental figure there at all, and they're not just fading into the background or conveniently dead, is a little different than I expected.
That's good.
Ethan gets to meet Lena's family, and there are a lot of them. She actually has a pretty big family. But the most important person is her uncle, whose name is Macon Ravenwood. Do I need to start like a counter of amazing names? Macon is also an actual parental figure who does play a role in the story. He's not just in the background. And in the movie adaptation, he's played by Jeremy Irons doing an amazing accent.
The accusations against my niece are all spurious lies.
So I couldn't help but picture Macon as that the entire time I was reading. Now, Macon is a surrogate father for Lena, because her dad is dead, and he has a reputation around Gatlin for being a weird shut-in, but he also leans into that. Like, he has a dog that is named Boo Radley. Insert reference here. And as we find out, Macon is not just a regular caster. He's actually a vampire. I'm sorry. He's a blood incubus. That's totally different. You see, as a blood incubus, he burns up if he goes out in the sun. And most blood incubuses drink blood to live, but Macon eats dreams instead. And yes, the books do use the word incubuses. You'd think it would be incubi, because that's like a real word, but whatever. The other member of Lena's extended family that is actually pretty important is her cousin named Ridley. Now, Ridley is only a couple of years older than Lena, and she went dark a while ago. Like, they were friends when they were kids, but after Ridley went dark, she's not evil, she's just kind of rude now, but, you know, either way, they don't really hang out anymore. Ridley starts a relationship with Ethan's best friend, who is a guy named Link, just a regular mortal dude living in a small town in South Carolina. And Ridley is actually using magic to manipulate him and make him fall in love with her. It's part of some sort of nefarious plan. And I think that Ridley is supposed to serve as some sort of warning for what Lena will turn into if she goes dark. But the thing is, there's another warning for Lena about what'll happen if she goes dark, and that's her mother, Seraphine. Seraphine is the main villain of the first book, and Maybe not the main villain of the later ones, but certainly a villain of the later books. And Lena's never met her. She just knows that she's evil and she's a very, very powerful caster. And she gets mentioned and brought up a lot before we actually see her in this book, which I do kind of like. You know, it gives her a presence in the story. She's not just an evil person they need to worry about. She is a force to be reckoned with. Now, from their research in the magical library, we learned that if Lena chooses the light, all of her dark family members will die. But if she chooses dark, then the opposite will happen. So Seraphine is trying to force her to choose dark so that she won't die. Hey, did I mention earlier that Lena's Uncle Macon is apparently a dark caster? Because he is. Yeah, he's just a totally normal guy, but he's a dark caster because he was claimed by the dark... Look, we'll get into that later. That said, once Lena finds out about this, she becomes kinda reluctant to choose the light, because she knows that Macon and Ridley and some of her other family members will die if she does it. And, I mean, like I said, Macon is a pretty normal dude in spite of being a dark caster. He still loves and cares for others, and he is fully willing to sacrifice his life for Lena. Like, he straight up tells her near the end of the book, like, no, you still need to choose light, it's fine if I die. So Lena being afraid of going dark and turning evil, it just doesn't make sense. It seems like she would still be fundamentally the same person if she does go dark. All the info about her family members dying doesn't come out until later, so at the beginning, she's just worried that she might turn magically evil despite being magically evil not really being that bad. There's a subplot about Lena nearly getting kicked out of school, but then her Uncle Macon shows up and is really cool so she doesn't get expelled.
My niece will go back to the institution that Gatlin presumes to call educational, and she will be persecuted no longer.
The characters also learn that Lena is descended from a caster woman named Genevieve Duquesne, and she was in love with one of Ethan's ancestors, who was also named Ethan Waite, and Ethan Waite was a Confederate deserter. Now, just to preface this, Gatlin, South Carolina is not a real town, but in the books, most of Gatlin got destroyed during William Sherman's Carolinas campaign in 1865, which was the final couple months of the American Civil War. And after he deserted, the other Ethan Waite got killed, so Genevieve used forbidden magic to raise him from the dead. But then he died immediately afterwards anyways, and this whole thing was kind of pointless. Anyways, that's what caused the curse that Lena and her family are afflicted with. Specifically, when she raised him from the dead, Genevieve used an artifact called the Book of Moons to bring him back, and now the book has the power to choose which members of this family go light and which ones go dark. Now, why does Lena get to choose while no one else does? Don't worry about it. She's the protagonist, so she gets to be different and special. Okay, technically not the protagonist, but close enough. Like I said before, Seraphine has been trying to force Lena to choose the dark, which honestly is like the least evil thing she does. Like, she is trying to prevent herself from dying here, just throwing that out there. And she is the one who made Ridley start dating Ethan's friend Link as part of her evil plan. Now, Ridley nearly kills Link on Seraphine's orders, but she does decide to spare him at the last second. Now, it's Lena's 16th birthday. Ethan has to go to a reenactment of a Civil War battle because plot reasons, and while he's there, Seraphine stabs him, and then she, along with some other dark casters, attack and kill Uncle Macon.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
In response to this, Lena takes the Book of Moons and uses it to, well, it's not explained super well, but basically she blocks out the moon at midnight. Like, her 16th moon was supposed to be when she chooses light or dark, but she blocks it out at midnight, so it doesn't happen and she doesn't have to choose, so she doesn't get claimed either. I don't know. Fuck it, it's magic. The climax of this book is largely just a couple of conversations and then a brief fight where they chase off Seraphine. And, you know, Macon dies as well. A few days after this, Ethan is listening to his iPod again, and the same song comes up, only now it's called 17 Moons. So it seems implied that Lena has only bought herself another year, and next year she's going to have to choose for real. Like I said, this is a very chunky book, but not a lot actually happens. There's some repetition of plot points, and there's a lot of hemming and hawing about not letting these kids find out information, which really they should have been told about this information a long time ago, but whatever. And there's not much else to say about what happens. Like, this book is way too long, but to its credit, it doesn't feel that long while reading. Like I said earlier, the prose is fun and easy to get into, and I think that's a blessing. Mostly. So the number one problem with this book is that Lena possibly going dark, the thing that serves as the main conflict and the main source of tension in the story, does not make any sense. Like, just hearing about it, you'd think that going dark would mean that casters turn evil, but it clearly doesn't. Macon is a dark caster, but he's still a good person who loves Lena and their family. When Lena finds out that choosing light will kill him, he reassures her that she needs to do it because it's the right thing to do. He's loving and self-sacrificing. He's clearly not evil. Ridley is kind of a jerk, but she's also clearly not evil. Like, she's rude and manipulative and dismissive of others' feelings, and she would take advantage of other people under the right circumstances, but she clearly still has empathy for other people. Like, near the end, when she nearly kills Link, she decides to spare him. And I'm pretty sure that Seraphine actually ordered her to kill him, so by sparing him, she's putting herself at risk. Like, that's a heroic act. And all of the other Dark Caster members of their family, and hell, all the other Dark Casters we meet in general, seem like pretty normal people, so if Lena goes dark, she's still herself. Similarly, if Lena goes light, she kills her mother, who she has never met and doesn't particularly like, and she knows is evil, but she also kills Macon and Ridley, and that would be sad and it would add drama, but it's probably for the best. And if Lena can choose, then her going dark doesn't seem likely, and being dark doesn't mean evil, so why am I supposed to care about any of this? It gets even weirder when you look at the incubi. Because, you see, the incubi, or again, incubuses as the books say, don't go light or dark when they're older like regular casters. Incubi are just born dark. But again, most of them seem like normal people. Like I said, Macon seems like a good man, and in the next book they introduce a new incubus named John. And John is kind of bad. Like, he's selfish, certainly, and he's kind of a jerk, but, spoilers, he does turn good and he does help the heroes save the day in the later books. Spoiler alert, Ethan's friend Link also turns into an incubus, and this changes nothing about his personality. Again, they're basically vampires. People can get turned into them. So the entire basis for all of this light-dark drama is just complete nonsense. This gets even worse when you see how little information we get about the magic and how it works. Actually, that's about it. Magic exists. No more information than that is given until the moment it becomes immediately relevant to whatever plot is happening. The dead can be resurrected, sometimes, sort of. If you block out the moon, then that prevents you from turning 16, I think. Like, it is mentioned that the casters have a lunar calendar, so they do measure time a little bit differently than mortals do. And casters aren't the only ones that have magic. Amma and the other keepers, and other mortals in general, do have some magic too, and it is apparently different than the type that casters use. How is it different? Well, most of the time when casters use magic it seems instinctive, like they just aren't really casting a spell or anything, they just like sort of shoot out fire or something, whereas when the keepers and other people do magic it seems more about performing rituals to perform specific effects. But casters sometimes do rituals for more complex magic too. So I don't know, when magic is involved, plot just happens. And that becomes far more clear as the books continue, because Ethan and other characters seem very incurious about the world they live in and the rules, and as a result, the rules and the world don't make much sense. Which I can overlook if it doesn't damage the rest of the story, like it's not that big a deal, but in this case it does, because the whole concept of light and dark casters doesn't make sense, and that's what the story is about. When the conflict revolves around magic, and someone magically becoming evil, and then that someone finds loopholes to avoid her fate, the mechanisms by which all of this functions need to be explained and explored, otherwise we can't get into the drama of it. We are just questioning how this works and why we should care. All that said, there are still some details about the caster world that I liked. Lena's last name is Duquesne, which is the same as her mother, but her father's last name was Ravenwood. However, caster women often take their mother's name. Like, it's a small detail, but it does showcase that the casters are a distinct culture. You know, they're not just people that have magic, they have their own traditions, they have their own values, and they have their own customs. I do wish the books went into more detail about that sort of thing, like, you know, casters should probably have their own religions and everything as well, because they have a very different view of the world and how it works than how mortals do, but I don't know, small details like that can help prop up bad world building in some very interesting ways, let's say.
I can't actually believe that I'm about to say this, but can I speak to him on my own for a moment?
Thank you, son. Thank you.
At the end of the copy of the book that I read, there was an interview with the authors, and the authors said that they told the story from Ethan, the boy's perspective, because they wanted to do something different. You know, they didn't want the female lead to just be on the outside of all the magic and stuff, which I do think is a good idea, because so many of these awful paranormal romances have protagonists that can solely be defined as girl. Like, what's her personality? She's a girl. What does she do in the story? She's a girl. She has no connection to the magical stuff before the story starts, no dreams or personality. She's just the girl we follow who falls in love with the supernatural boy. And the supernatural boy usually is the one who gets to have all the cool powers and fight all the bad guys. So, by making Lena the one with the connection to the supernatural world, these books avoid that problem. Right? Nah. Beautiful Creatures has the same problem that a lot of other books in this genre have, which is that the protagonist doesn't fucking do anything. Ethan isn't completely useless, but he is like 80% useless, and Lena does most of the cool stuff. Like, Ethan helps her do research on the magical curse and figure out what's going on. That's why I say he's only 80% useless. And being able to do good research is a valuable skill, especially in today's world where half of the planet seems to not realize that YouTube has a frickin' search bar. So it's right there, guys. You don't need to just let the algorithm spoon feed you everything. You can search for your own stuff. But the only real difference between Beautiful Creatures and the rest of this genre is that the genders of the useful and useless characters are flipped. And I kept thinking that this book would be better if it was told from Lena's POV. However, despite Ethan being kind of unimportant, I didn't mind that much, because he is still an actual character. Not long before the story begins, Ethan's mom died, and that is not his sole defining character trait. It's not even his biggest character trait. Like, you would think it would be, but it's not. Sure, it obviously affects him, and it obviously makes him sad, but it's been long enough now that he understands that life moves on when you lose a loved one, and he just needs to keep on trucking. And in some ways, that's sadder than losing them in the first place. On top of that, Gatlin is his home, and it's the only one he's ever known, but he hates it there. Like, he loves it and he hates it in equal measure. It's the same people he's always known, doing the same things that they've always done. Gatlin is a dying town with nothing going for it and no hopes of getting better, so Ethan makes it very clear from early on that he wants to leave this place as soon as he finishes school. So when a new girl pops up, it does make sense that Ethan might become interested in her and then later become enamored with her just because she's something different. And while many of his peers are judgmental and cruel, Ethan is set apart by not being judgmental and cruel. He's actually very open-minded about the world outside of Gatlin. He's not terrified of those godless liberals like a lot of his neighbors. However, at the same time, he doesn't look down on his neighbors, and it would be easy for it to come across that way in the book. Ethan certainly dislikes a lot about these people, and as a reader, I also dislike a lot about them. Like, his friend Link has a mom who is known locally as the crazy religious lady. Like, she tried to get Harry Potter banned, she thinks the devil is to be blamed for literally all of society's ills, you know, that sort of person. That is a real type of person who really does exist in the real world. I've met this type of person before. Like, they're more common in the rural South than anywhere else, I think, but they exist everywhere. And Ethan doesn't like her very much, but he does see the humanity in her too, along with all the others. They are backwards people in many ways, but they're also capable of acts of great kindness and camaraderie, let's say. They are human beings, which includes all of the messy contradictions that human beings are known for. And Ethan has complicated feelings towards them. So, basically, I was focusing on all of this stuff about Ethan rather than focusing on how he doesn't contribute to the plot that much. He does help a little, like I said, But beyond that, he's really just there to fall in love with Lena. Now, I will mention now that the sequels fix this problem, because Ethan contributes a lot more, but I think I would be okay if he didn't. Like, Ethan is a character, and I like him. Even when he's not a big damn hero, he's fun to follow.
Today, smoking is gonna save lives.
Beautiful Darkness is an improvement over Beautiful Creatures in some ways. We learn more about the caster world, and Ethan takes a more central role in driving events, but a lot of the problems from book 1 are still there. It is far longer than it needs to be, for starters. The book begins at Macon's funeral. He's being buried in the town's local cemetery, very close to where Ethan's mother is buried, actually, which he finds odd, but he doesn't think about it too much at first. Now, since Lena is a caster and she's grieving, it changes the weather and makes it rain, because, I don't know, fuck it, it's magic. There's a bunch of blood incubi that show up there, one of whom lingers behind to give condolences to Lena. And this incubus can actually stand in the sunlight, unlike the others. And again, Ethan remarks that that's kind of weird, but he doesn't stop to think about it for that long. Over the next few months, Ethan keeps hearing the song 17 Moons. Brief aside, I do like how these books actually take place over a long period of time. You know, it makes sense that people could actually fall in love and learn about each other and learn about the world and go on these adventures if they have a lot of time to do it. A lot of these crappy paranormal romance books have people meet, fall in love, and then go on these long adventures to save the world, and it takes place over the course of like 6 weeks. It's just nice to see that not happening here. Anyways, Ethan keeps hearing the song 17 Moons. Lena is mostly cooped up at home and not going to school, but she does leave her house to hang out with Ethan a couple of times. Now, Link mentions that Lena is acting very unusual, which at first you would think, like, okay, yeah, her father figure just died horribly. That's why she's acting weird. She's grieving, but she's acting unusual in a way you wouldn't expect from someone who lost her father figure. Now, something to note is that Link still remembers everything that happened while he was under the magical hypnosis from Ridley, so now he's aware of the casters and the magical world and all that, which still exists. And Link also does still have feelings for Ridley as well. It's a small deviation from the formula, but I just needed to bring it up. Like, there's often some sort of quirky best friend character for the protagonist, but most of the time they just exist on the fringes of the story. But Link actually does play a role in things, and he does find out about all the supernatural stuff, and he does actually help out. It's kind of nice, you know? It helps the cast feel bigger and more well-rounded, because sometimes these books fell into a trap where it felt like there were 2 leads and some others who are just there and don't actually matter. Okay, Link isn't that deep, but there's something to him. You know, he's a funny guy, he gets a few good jokes, and just like Ethan, he is also an outcast in their community, and it's implied that it's largely because of his mom. And it makes sense that he and Ethan would become friends. They're outcasts together. Oftentimes that's how it works. And he gets a few moments to shine and help save the day. So like I said earlier, just basic storytelling does help set these books apart from their peers. Now, throughout all of this, Ethan keeps seeing visions of Macon and a young girl, and somehow it takes him a really long time to figure out that that young girl Macon's hanging out with was his mom.
Oh, that's stupid!
Like, I guess she just looked a lot different when she was a teenager, whatever. The point is, Macon and Ethan's mom were actually in love, and life just pulled them separate ways, because a mortal can't be in love with a caster because, I don't know, we need some conflict here. And also, Ethan's mom was a keeper, so she knew about all the magic stuff, and she just kept it a secret from him and his dad. You would think that would be a lot more important than it winds up being. Remember the incubus that was standing out in the sun at Macon's funeral? Well, his name is John Breed. An odd name. And anyways, John and Lena start hanging out together because we need a love triangle, so the two of them seem very close. Like, at one point, Ethan sees the two of them dancing together in a bar, and he gets really upset. And upon seeing that Ethan is upset, Lena just tells him she doesn't want to see him anymore because we need standard, pointless breakup bullshit. But we can't just have Ethan get fucked by a bad boy. We can't just have Ethan get cucked by a bad boy. Sorry, that was autocorrect. We can't just let Ethan get cucked by a bad boy, so we need a parallel love triangle for him, too. So he gets a summer job at the library, and while he's there, he meets a keeper in training named Olivia, or Liv for short. The two of them are similar, and they do get along pretty well. Like, they're both outsiders to this magical world, but they're also both fascinated by it. Maybe they actually have more in common than Ethan and Lena do. Maybe it would be better if the two of them... Nah. Like, you know exactly what kind of book this is. You know that's not gonna happen. But she is the person to help Ethan figure out that his mom was a keeper when she was alive. So, you know, she does contribute. Ethan continues getting visions, and he also sees a guy named Abraham Ravenwood. Amazing name. One of Lena's ancestors. And he's a scheming dark caster who took the Book of Moons after Genevieve used it to revive the other Ethan and took it for nefarious schemes of some sort. Also, we find out that Ethan died in the first book. Oh, shit! Like, yeah, we find out kind of like that. It's just, oh yeah, by the way, Ethan, you died last time. Like when Seraphine stabbed you, we didn't catch you and heal you really quickly. You died, and then we brought you back from the dead. Lena actually brought him back the same way Genevieve brought back the other Ethan. What could possibly go wrong?
Foreshadowing is a literary device and...
Now, Lena knows that bringing someone back from the dead has a high price associated with it, and she thinks that Macon's death was the price she paid. So she actually blames herself for him dying. That's why she's been acting so weird for several months. Now, John actually begins leading Lena down into the caster tunnels to find some place called the Great Barrier, which is supposed to be the barrier between mortal and caster worlds. And Link, Liv, and Ethan start thinking that Seraphine is hatching evil plans of some sort. So the three of them decide to go down into the tunnels and go on a journey to save Lena from herself and from her mother's evil plans. Now, I need to take a minute to talk about how great the tunnels are as a setting, because they are actually very, very good. We are introduced to the tunnels in the first book, but pretty much all we see is this big magical library, and they tell Ethan, like, hey, don't wander off, because these tunnels go on basically forever and you could get lost and we'll never find you again. But even just the library, no one is quite sure how big it is or what sort of knowledge is located there. It's this enormous repository full of history and dark corners and unknowable magic, and that's just one place in this tunnel network. Because at one point in book 2, Ethan, Liv, and Link go down to explore the tunnels a bit, and they walk for a couple of minutes, and then they pop up hundreds of miles away from where they entered. So the tunnels can stretch and compress space. They exist all over the world. And there are entire societies down there. Like, there are casters that live down there. They open bars and other businesses. Actually, the bar that Lena and John were dancing together at was down in the caster tunnels. That's how they were able to get in there. And there are even some ruins down there, which are so ancient that no one is quite sure who made them or what made them. And the books barely mention any of this. In fact, Ethan barely seems to realize it, or at least he doesn't focus on it that much. There's even demons down there. Now, what are demons? How do they work in this world? I don't know, don't think about it. They're demons. Like, even in book 3, we learn a little bit more about them, but we still have no idea what demons are, or what their vibe is about, but hey, at least they're there. And the demons are just the beginning. The true horrors of this world are so vast that even casters and keepers can barely see their faint outlines. Like, the tunnels don't feel like they were made by people. They feel like a universe unto themselves, and the books don't even acknowledge this except for a few small scenes. I kind of like that these books could easily have become a cosmic horror story, and the authors completely ignored that to make it a teen romance. Like, that's not even a joke. That's such a bold choice that I kind of have to love it. Like, Ethan finds out about some eldritch horrors, but he doesn't think about them too long because if he does, he'll go mad from the revelation. Like, it's kind of incredible that that's in there, and I feel like 90% of the people who read these books either didn't pick up on that, or they just barely picked up on that. And I don't even know if the authors did that on purpose, but whatever they did, I liked it. Anyways, Ethan, Liv, and Link go down into the tunnels to try and find the Great Barrier. While they're down there, they find a magical artifact called an arc light, and they realize pretty quickly that Uncle Macon is actually still alive, and he's imprisoned in the arc light, which does cheapen his sacrifice from book 1 if he didn't actually die, but whatever. They release him from the arc light, and now he's just back. Like, he's back in the story. He brings some of his other family members down into the tunnel so that they can find Seraphine at the Great Barrier and confront her. There's a big battle between the light casters and some dark casters, along with vampires, along with incubi and some demons. And Seraphine pulls Lena's 17th moon out of time to force her to choose whether she'll be light or dark right away.
Okay.
I guess she can do that. But Lena and the others are able to force Seraphine to flee, and then they use the Arclight to imprison John Breed, because, again, he did lure them down there as part of Seraphine's evil plan. So then Lena goes to the Great Barrier, and because now it's her 17th moon, she has to make a choice. And she decides to be both light and dark.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess she can do that. Like, one of her eyes stays green, the other one turns yellow. She found a loophole! Surely that won't have any ramifications in the future. So the day seems to be saved. But during the fighting, Link got bitten by John, who... We find out that John is actually half caster and half incubus, which is why he could go out into the sun. This is not really elaborated on, it's just, oh yeah, he's half and half. But anyways, Link is now an incubus, or, sorry, he's a quarter incubus. Now he has to adjust his life because sunlight burns him and he has to drink blood, but just like Uncle Macon, he decides to eat dreams instead. I don't know, it feels like the authors wanted to write a book about vampires, but then they just decided that was overdone. Because we have characters in these books that are basically just vampires, and casters always refer to humans as mortals, which is a little bit of an odd name, considering that the casters are also mortal. And Ethan and Lena can't be together. There's a Southern Gothic aesthetic on everything. Like, it just gives off a lot of vampire vibes, and it kind of feels like they just changed that relatively late in the writing process. Anyways, Ridley was there during all the fighting, and she also lost her magic because, I don't know, magic shit happens sometimes. So she takes the Arclight where John is imprisoned, and she looks at it for a bit, and that is the end of book 2.
I say Dimitri is a god. Well, I'm an atheist. An atheist with a big gun.
In an ideal world, love triangles would not be everywhere. We don't live in an ideal world, though. We live in this one, so there are more love triangles than there are stars in the observable universe. And just like stars, some shine brighter than others. Because Ethan and Lena's relationship is believable and works well in book 1. Ethan and Lena are both actual characters. I buy that they love each other. John and Liv are actual characters too. They're just not very good ones. Liv is a keeper in training. She does have a bit in common with Ethan, and I can see why they would connect, but there's really nothing else to her. You know, what are her internal struggles? What sort of life did she lead before signing on to the Keepers? Mostly unknown, and the books don't care about it that much. Like, the most development she gets is that because of her actions in the second book, she actually gets kicked out of the Keeper training program, and she doesn't seem to regret it because she knows she did the right thing to help her friends, but she is still sad about it. It's kind of funny to imagine the story from her perspective because she mostly just tags along and helps the others research stuff. What makes her tick, though? She's a love interest to the protagonist, so what is there to her? Why does she need to be in this story at all? Or, more importantly, why does her role in the story need to be as Ethan's love interest? Would her role in the story even change at all if she was just his friend? It's unclear. Then there's the leg of the other love triangle, John Breed, which... God, that sounds like the name of a porn star with a shady reputation. John Breed is a incubus, who is a bad boy, and he rides a motorcycle. I don't think it's ever specified, but I like to imagine he's wearing a leather jacket. And he has even less to him than Liv. Like, he's different and special because he's an incubus-caster hybrid, and in a lot of books, he would be the protagonist or love interest just based on being like different and special and unique like that. And he's a part of Lena's world, so she's supposed to be tempted away from her true love, Ethan, and she's supposed to think like, oh, maybe he would be better for me than Ethan. But we're not seeing things from Lena's perspective here, so we're barely seeing her interact with John at all, and that's all filtered through the lens of Ethan, who doesn't like that the two of them are getting along so well. What sort of chemistry do Lena and John have? It is unclear. And I'll be honest with you, it is even weirder that she would jump into the arms of another boy than Ethan would run into the arms of another girl, because Lena has a big family. She has 5 or 6 aunts and uncles, she has grandparents, she has multiple cousins. It feels like she came from somewhere. You know, it feels like she had a life before the story began, which is kind of nice. The point I'm getting at is that she has a life outside of Ethan, and she has a support network, so you don't sit there and wonder, like, oh, if they broke up, how would she go on? But she has to jump into the arms of this new guy just for the sake of drama. And later, when we see that he betrayed them, it makes Lena look kinda dumb, because she has no reason to trust him, and no reason to think that he's her friend or anything else. He's just the bad boy with a leather jacket, so now it's time for drama. Liv and John do affect the story, in this book and in the sequels, so I understand why they're here. It's just that them being legs of overlapping love triangles is not very good and kind of unnecessary. Like, Ethan and Lena already had things driving a wedge between them. Those should have been the focus, but instead we get this weird pre-made love triangle plot that distracts from the more interesting drama and character development. I would really rather read about two lovers who are torn apart by society and the fact that one of them raised the other from the dead than I would read about more love triangle nonsense. And while I have you here, I just need to mention that it is a little strange for Ethan and Lena to both be descended from people who were in love 150 years ago. It feels kind of like it's trying to emphasize that their relationship is destiny or something, you know, as opposed to just people who fell in love. Because, like, it's not incest, obviously, but by drawing a link between their families a few generations back, it does, let's just say it brushes up against incest.
This is incest!
No, it's not.
Yes, it is, James.
We're not related.
Oh, that makes it okay, I suppose.
Well, it makes it not incest.
And it seems contradictory to what these books are saying about Ethan and Lena. Because Ethan dislikes Gatlin in part because everyone there is stuck in the past. They venerate an old pointless battle that the Confederates won in 1865 because it was the last time these people succeeded at anything. None of them seem to have any dreams or goals for the future. Ethan seems to feel that if he stays in Gatlin, his life will be dictated by people who died before he was born. On the other hand, Lena dislikes Genevieve and her mother because she feels that they have dominated her life since before she was even born. And her character arc is about overcoming what others say and forging her own destiny. And by having Genevieve and the other Ethan be central to their lives and to the story of the books, it's almost like the books are saying that the past really is more important than the present. You know, like their destiny was always going to find them, regardless of what they did. At least, that's the undertones here, and it's stupid, because it undermines the rest of the story, and it makes it seem like the others are all right to be stuck in the past. Book 3, Beautiful Chaos. This is the worst book in the series, by a fair margin. It's still not awful, but it is the worst book. This is a chunky book, it's way too long, but it's not long in a boring way, I will say that. Some long books are long and nothing happens. A lot does happen in Beautiful Chaos, it's just that most of it does not matter in the fucking slightest. During the massive boom of paranormal young adult romance novels that came out after Twilight, most of them were trilogies. Sometimes they would be longer though, they would be 4 books or maybe even 5. Like Hush Hush and Fallen are both 4 books long. Sometimes there were even more though, like there were spin-offs, sometimes there was a novella from the POV of the love interest, like Everneath had that. But here's the problem, these bad paranormal romances were usually pretty light on plot to begin with. Like, even as trilogies, the plot was very, very spread thin. And when you add even more books, the plot gets spread even more thinly. For example, in Hush Hush, Book 1 is a self-contained story with sequel potential. Like, you can just read the first Hush Hush book and get a complete story there. But then Book 2 is main character girl being mad that her boyfriend broke up with her, and her also thinking that maybe he killed her dad. Let's not talk about that. Book 3 begins with her losing her memories, so she spends half the frickin' book relearning everything about the supernatural world and about her supernatural boyfriend and everything, which is stuff the audience already knows. And then Book 4 introduces a whole new army and villains so that there can be a climactic battle that lasts maybe 10 pages. Like, there's really just not enough there for 4 books, and The Caster Chronicles has the same issue. Book 1 is largely self-contained. You can just read beautiful creatures and get a mostly self-contained story there. Book 2, they seemingly defeat the villain, and Lena overcomes the threat that might kill her loved ones. She decides to be both light and dark, so now she doesn't have to worry about that anymore. And then Book 3, Beautiful Chaos, comes along and they're just searching for a new conflict. And then Book 4 is a new thing entirely, which, don't worry, we'll get to that. So a lot happens in Book 3, but most of it straight up does not matter. And I mentioned earlier that if I were to rewrite these books, I would just make them a trilogy. Like, I would trim most of the subplots from Book 1, and I would end it not with Lena, like, blocking out the moon and pushing off her decision for another year. I would end it with her choosing both light and dark. And then I would combine Books 2 and 3. I would remove most of the love triangle stuff. Like, Liv and John would still be there, but they would just be friends with everybody. And then Book 4 can mostly stay as it is, but again, we'll get to that. Anyways, Lena has now become both light and dark, and Seraphine is defeated. The day is saved, and the heroes can bask in their triumph, right? Well, of course not. Apparently, Lena choosing to be both light and dark has ruptured reality somehow, and now casters are just losing control of their powers. Like, spells don't work the way they used to. Although, I need to take a moment to mention that spells are called casts in these books, which just sounds really weird because there are sentences where characters are like, he casted a cast, and I'm like, okay, settle down, Tommy Pickles. But the mortal world is changing too. It's overwhelmed with thousands and thousands and thousands of bugs and a heat wave, and we find out over the course of the book that the world is actually going to end soon. Like, all these extreme weather events are going to get even worse and everyone will die. And on top of all of that, Ethan is also acting very weird. You see, he's no longer right-handed, which he used to be, and he no longer likes food that he used to love. When she finds out about this, Amma takes him to a seer who uses voodoo magic of some sort, because remember, mortals can also use magic sometimes in this world. And the seer tells Ethan that when he came back from the dead, only half of his soul came with him. The other half is still in the afterlife. He and Lena also learn that in order to save the world, they need to sacrifice the one who is two in order to fix everything. And the book tries really, really hard to make you think that the one who is two is Lena, but it's very, very obviously Ethan, so we just have to pretend that there's ambiguity about this for 400 frickin' pages. There are a bunch of subplots here, but they don't matter. Like, remember Abraham Ravenwood, one of Lena's ancestors? Well, he's around, he's being evil and harassing the characters, sometimes, along with Seraphine. And I just want to mention that Seraphine is just straight up a better villain than Abraham, because both of them are just kind of evil for the sake of it, and both of them are largely a presence that is felt off-screen instead of being seen up close. And when both of them show up in the story, like face-to-face, some shit does go down, and they're too powerful to confront directly, so a lot of times the heroes have to run away or hide. So they're very, very similar villains, but Seraphine has a bit more to her than Abraham does. She has a little bit of a sympathetic backstory, because, again, she didn't choose to go dark, it just happened, and then she got expelled from her family. And she's actually there from the beginning. Like, from book 1, Seraphine's presence is felt in the background, whereas Abraham doesn't even get mentioned until later. And she's also Lena's mom, so fighting her is inherently more dramatic than fighting her great-grandfather, you know? I'm saying that I would have preferred if Abraham just wasn't here, and we just let Seraphine do all the evil villainous stuff. Link is also there, and he's getting used to his new nature as a vampire. As a succubus. I don't know how I keep making that mistake. He can't go out in the sun, and by being an incubus, he can now teleport. Because incubi can teleport, and that's about it. Link doesn't spend a whole lot of time getting used to the fact that he's not human anymore. In Book 2, Ridley does help out the characters in the caster tunnels for a bit, and in Book 3, I guess she's just one of their friends? Like, she's still a jerk, she's just a jerk with no magic now. Or so it seems. Because at one point, they all go to a party, and Ridley seems to cast a spell that causes a bunch of people to fight while they're there, and everyone's like, wait, what the hell? Ridley's using magic. How did that happen? And then later they find John Breed, hiding in Lena's house. Yeah, it's called Ravenwood Manor. It's like this big magical house, which is way bigger on the inside than the outside. But anyways, yeah, John has been hiding there in Ridley's bedroom for a couple of months.
I am no pervert.
Just in her bedroom, and no one noticed. I'm not saying that's impossible, but it does strain credulity. See, Ridley freed him from the Arclight, and then she magically bound him to the house so he can't leave. How did she magically bind him to the house? If she doesn't have any magic, don't worry about it. But now she's wearing some sort of belt that works as a conduit, so John is using magic and Ridley is just directing it. And once all the main characters find out about this, Macon finds out pretty quickly too, and he unbinds John, so now he just no longer lives in their house. Like, that's just such a strange plot point, and it gets no attention at all. At one point, some vampires, I'm so sorry, at one point some incubi attack them, and John summons a bunch of sunlight to burn them all up and kill them all, because he can do that. Like, you'd think John being able to summon the sun would be important somehow, but it's really not. It's just that he's special and different. Also, the leader of the evil pack of incubi is literally named Hunting.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
Gods, I love the names in these books. Like, a lot of the names in these books are just so odd, but they're odd in a way that makes sense. You know, these are a bunch of aggressively southern wizards that hide from mainstream society, and sometimes they just become evil. Like, I expect them to have weird names. But the mortals also have weird names sometimes. Like, for example, in this book, Ethan's dad starts a relationship with Ethan's English teacher, who is named Mrs. English.
I know writers who...
Abraham and Seraphine summon a demon queen named Lilum, and Ethan talks to her for a minute, and this is surprisingly unimportant to all of the events that go on here? Which, I don't know, man. It's, like I said, there's a lot of subplots, but none of them matter. Marion Ashcroft, who is a keeper and the local librarian and an old friend of Ethan's mom, goes on trial, and John and the others help her escape that trial, and the leader of the keepers who is putting her on trial is a guy named Angelus, and they mention that he hates mortals, and that does become relevant eventually, later on. Just remember that Angelus exists. So, sacrificing the one who is two is supposed to happen on the winter solstice, and 5 days before the winter solstice, Abraham and Seraphine attack. Like, they just kind of pop out of the sky and then come after Lena and Ethan. Not sure why they didn't do that before, if they could always do that, but whatever. And they attack, and during the fighting, Lena burns Seraphine to death, and Link teleports them to safety. All of this stuff happens, and it's just kind of nothing. Like, events happen, and I don't even think the books care about them. It is so strange. Anyways, Ethan finally realizes that he's the one who is two, and he needs to just straight up die in order to reunite his soul. So he decides to jump off of a nearby water tower to his death. But Amma comes up with a plan to save him, so she brings in the voodoo priest from earlier, and he summons some evil spirits, but then Macon appears and forces him to leave. Like, he just kind of uses some shadow magic that I guess he has, I don't know. And then Ethan climbs to the top of the town's water tower. He sees a clone of himself, and they fight each other before falling off. It's actually a pretty good cliffhanger.
And by the power vested in me by the Universal Life Church, I now pronounce you husband and husband.
So the magical world in these books kind of sucks, as I said earlier, which might make it sound like the entire setting is terrible, but this isn't a fantasy novel, this is a paranormal romance. The magical world here is hidden beneath the surface of our real world, which means that both the magical world and the way that the real world is portrayed here are both equally important. Even when done poorly, these types of stories are about what happens when those two worlds collide. You know, what happens when a normal person and a supernatural one fall in love? In what ways do their different natures bring them together or drive a wedge between them? Like, you could tell a similar story with a couple from different religions or different countries or different socioeconomic classes. So in order to emphasize what happens when the two worlds collide, they both need to be written well. The atmosphere and the logic of the real world parts of the story are equally important as the magical stuff, And all the real-world stuff in the Castor Chronicles is pretty good. Gatlin County is an obnoxious and unpleasant place at times, but there's an odd beauty in that. You know, Ethan has affection for his underfunded, crumbling school. He has to drive his great-aunts everywhere all the time because they're just too old to drive themselves. And they're annoying, but he loves them with all his heart. Like, there's a Dairy Queen in town. It's the only fast food place they have in that town. But the sign is missing a letter, so everybody just calls it Dairy Keen. Ethan tells an anecdote at one point about one of his neighbors who got hit by a garbage truck, and how the settlement from that was so big that his family instantly became one of the wealthiest in Gatlin overnight. And the main example Ethan gives of how wealthy they are is that they started eating at Applebee's 5 nights a week. Like, yeah, that's white trash royalty right there. But if you've ever been around trashy people, that is kind of an accurate depiction of what a lot of them are like. And despite how shitty and old and poor everything in Gatlin is, this is the place where Ethan and Link live. All their fondest memories are here. Their friends and their loved ones are here. Through all the irritation and resentment, Ethan does still love this place. And whatever else I can say about this place, it does feel like a small southern town. Like, the authors really did capture the pseudo-friendly but also very mean and judgmental attitude that these places seem to always have. Like, there's a girl named Savannah Snow who does try to bully Lena a bit in the first book, and she does it a bit in the sequels too, but it becomes less and less important as time goes on. And Savannah just targets her because, well, like, she can. And often that is how bullies act. But everyone just shrugs it off because Lena is an outsider. And because she's an outsider, that means they look down on her. How dare she come to our town and exist near us? Like, the people here have a weird superiority complex, but that obviously stems from an inferiority complex that they have, because they know their town sucks, but they're so defined by being from this town and by living in this town that they can't admit to it. An attack on their home is an attack on them, because their whole identity is wrapped up in what town they're from and what role they play in this town's life. Like, they're not super great people, but they are people with very, very human flaws, is what I'm saying. There's a sense of history to this place. Like, this place is old, but it's not unfathomably old. You know, we know its origins. And people focus on the past because things were good back then. They had a functional local economy, and they didn't ever have to think about how there are other types of people out in the world. You know, people who aren't white, conservative, Southern Baptist Christians.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Link's mom is not a major character here. She's more background decoration. And every time she comes up, she's railing about about how modernity is the work of the devil, except for those parts of modernity that she personally likes, of course. And a lot of people do latch onto that message because the past was good for them, or at least they feel like the past was good for them. But now their local businesses have been shut down by places like Walmart, and they turn on the news and they see all the big city liberals are living much nicer lives than them. And those guys don't go to church, and sometimes they're gay! Sometimes it seems like the past is all they have, so they wrap themselves up in it and act like it matters. That's why they have a reenactment every year of a battle that the Confederates won. But there's no future in Gatlin. That's why Ethan wants to leave so much. Like, it's a shockingly well-realized setting, and that shocks me even more because it could easily have just been a town with nothing else to it. It's just the place where the story takes place. But instead, it has layers to it, and I really have to commend these books for pulling that off.
Stay calm! Wait, everybody calm down!
So Beautiful Redemption is the final, and by far the shortest, book in this series. It has its problems, but I will say it sticks the landing. In fact, I actually finished this book on the same day I watched the finale of The Boys, and I feel very similarly about the finale of both of these. Like, sure, the lead up to it wasn't amazing, but at least they did finish in a satisfying way. So Ethan dies after jumping off the water tower at the end of the last book, and then he arrives in the other world, which is the afterlife. He's in a house with his mom now, and there are some other houses nearby, because every time someone gets buried in Gatlin Cemetery, they get a house in the afterlife.
Okay.
And Ethan spends some time with his mom and one of his aunts who died, and he is happy to see them, but he's also sad that he's dead. And he finds out pretty quickly that he was actually buried near Ravenwood Manor. and without a proper funeral. Lena and the others decided to hide his death for some reason, so they actually cast a spell on Ethan's dad so that he doesn't know what's going on and he doesn't question anything, and they just told everyone that Ethan had to go deal with a family emergency out of state. But yeah, they brainwash his dad, and that's kind of fucked up. It's not focused on at all, but it is kind of fucked up that they did that. Ethan can actually look out and see his friends in the world of the living, but they can't see him. He's kind of like a ghost. However, Amma can sense him being there, and she knows something's up. She just doesn't know quite what. And Ethan is able to affect the world a little bit. So he moves a piece of cake, and she realizes that he's there. And that's about it for his interaction with them, but they realize, like, oh yeah, he's alive. Well, okay, they don't realize he's alive, but they realize he's watching them from the afterlife. He also decides to send messages using a local newspaper's crossword puzzle, which sounds like a lot of fun, but again, the book focuses on that a lot less than you would think. In the afterlife, Ethan runs into a dark caster named Obligatory Trueblood. See, that's the kind of name you give to an evil wizard from the south. So in the earlier books, we learn about something called the Caster Chronicles, and those are a record of everything that has ever happened, as well as things that will happen in the future. They're like this very important magical artifact. They aren't mentioned a whole lot up until this book, but Obadiah Trueblood tells Ethan that someone altered his page in order to make him die, because he wasn't supposed to die. So Ethan decides to go off on a journey to find the Caster Chronicles and then alter his own page so that he comes back to life. So he goes off on a journey to find the Far Keep, which is basically the headquarters of all the Keepers, which is where Angelus is. You remember Angelus? No? Well, he's the final antagonist. While he's on this journey, Ethan runs into a guy named Xavier. Now, Xavier crossed the Keepers many, many years ago, and now he lives in torment in the other world. Also, Abraham Ravenwood is apparently still a threat, and Ethan realizes that, okay, they need to get the Book of Moons away from Abraham Ravenwood because he's using its power to do evil, magical things, so he resolves to steal it from Abraham and then give it to Xavier so it will be hidden in the other world forever and no one can use it. Remember earlier when I mentioned that he sends messages to his friends using the local newspaper's crossword? Well, yeah, he tells them about all of this. So then we cut to part 2, which is told from Lena's perspective. I'm gonna be honest with you, this whole section of the book kind of feels like the authors realized that they forgot to deal with one of the major villains in the last book, and then they were just scrambling to find a way to get rid of him. So Lena and John go to New Orleans in order to steal the Book of Moons from Abraham. And Ridley is actually there too. She went to Abraham of her own accord to try and get her magic back, but now she's being held captive and she can't leave. And then they free her and they go home. Abraham shows up, so Lena, John, Ridley, Macon, and Link all fight him. And his magic is too strong to do much, but Link just teleports in front of him and stabs him in the chest. And he actually cracks a joke while doing it. He says, "That's how you kill someone mortal style," which is odd, because Link is like a normal dude. And yeah, Abraham was evil. I'm not sad that he's dead, but also, Link, you just violently ended a man's life. You'd think that would affect him in some way.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
So they find the book, and Lena decides that in order to bring Ethan back to life, they have to send the book to the other world with him, which she already brought him back from the dead once, but okay, whatever. They gather up Lena's whole family and they do a big magical ritual to send the book to the other world. This lasts a very, very long time, but it does work, and then the book goes to the other world, and now we're back to part 3, which is the rest of the book, and it's Ethan's POV now. He gives the Book of Moons to Xavier, which allows him to enter the Far Keep, but in order to enter their super secret headquarters, which is called the Great Keep, he has to complete a dangerous maze, and apparently the Great Keep is also known as Olympus to the Greeks, and as Valhalla by the Norse? I don't think that actually adds up, but okay. He goes through the maze, he uses some stones and some leaves to mark his path, and then he finds a pit of bones.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine.
He sees a woman in the pit of bones who attacks him, and he doesn't realize it at first, but he finds out pretty quickly that this is Seraphine. because in the battle where she died, she got all burned up and now she's blind. And they talk for a minute, and then she sets the pit of bones on fire and kills herself in the process. And Ethan thinks he's about to die too, but then he closes his eyes, and when he opens them, all the bones are just gone. They burned up along with Seraphine. Yeah, Seraphine just straight up sacrificed her own life, or afterlife, in order to help him, and it's ambiguous as to why she did it.
Suicide is badass.
But she's been pure evil for the whole series until now, so this really just feels like a dumb excuse to get Ethan out of trouble. Also, I'm not sure how she's able to die if this is the afterlife. Like, she already died once, and now she's dying again. Like, if you die in the afterlife, does your soul just cease existing altogether? How's this work? I don't know, man. Maybe this server just has a bunch of permadeath roleplayers or something. So Ethan finally reaches the Great Keep, and he meets the ruling Council of Vagueness. They're run by Angelus, who actually is the one who altered Ethan's page in the Castor Chronicles. Now, he's not supposed to do that, so Ethan demands that he be given his page, and he realizes that he was actually never supposed to die. The world was actually supposed to end, and him dying in order to save it screwed up Angelus's evil plan. While I was reading, I wrote in my notes, I think Angelus was trying to destroy the world because he wishes he was a caster. Really nice for the final antagonist of the series to have such screen presence and a rich motive for his actions. And I was pretty close, actually. It's confirmed later that Angelus was born mortal and turned himself into a caster with foul magic experiments that are just as vague as they are foul. And his motive for trying to destroy the world is, well, he doesn't like mortals very much, so he's gonna kill everybody, including the casters. Makes sense. And I stand by my initial assessment. It is not great that the final villain is this guy, because, like, really? This was the best idea you had? Like, after Seraphine and Abraham and the others who were kind of fun, but, like, really? This is it? Okay. Anyways, Angelus refuses to hand over his page, and then Xavier shows up and proposes that Ethan be given the page if he can complete a challenge. If he can find his page from the book and reach it, then he is allowed to alter it. But if Angelus can prevent him from finding it and reaching it, then he can't. And they agree, so they're both transported to a big chamber somewhere in this magical land of vagueness. The chamber has a pool of water with an island in the middle, and the Castor Chronicles is a book which is just sitting on a pedestal on that island. And the water is full of corpses. Angelus tries to run across after Ethan taunts him, but then the corpses come to life and drag him under. And then Ethan follows, but then Angelus comes back out of the water, and it turns out he cast a spell to make the bodies move, and they attack Ethan. And I don't know why he went through this whole song and dance of pretending to die briefly rather than just casting a spell to use on Ethan, but whatever. I will say that the writing of this scene was extremely good and tense. Like, the climax is a bit out of left field, but they did put their all into it, because Ethan is trying to literally walk across piles of bodies, and then they come to life and start grabbing him and dragging him underwater. Like, that is terrifying. Ethan realizes that he needs to pay for passage, so he throws a rock and it lands in the water, and then the corpses leave him alone. And then he goes to the island where the Castor Chronicles is held, and he sees that Angelus has already written a bunch on his own page. It's implied he's been altering pages at will for years and years, which is a big no-no. So Ethan grabs a candle, which is nearby for some reason, and he sets Angelus's page in the book on fire. It burns up, and then Angelus vanishes. Yay, I guess. And now Ethan has the opportunity to alter his own page, so he does that, and then he disappears and reappears at the water tower the night he killed himself. Amma is there, just like before, and she says she isn't going to let him die, and she has a plan to save things, and this time he lets her go through with it, so she sells her own soul to the afterlife in order to fix the world. She dies, in other words. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure if Ethan went back in time here, or if something else happened. Because either way, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because the events of Beautiful Redemption are not undone, because Abraham and Seraphine and Angelus are still dead, and everyone seems to remember everything that happened in this book, so it's not like Ethan just went back in time and undid everything that happened here. And if he didn't travel back in time, if he didn't undo everything, then why did Amma have to die? Because Ethan dying and reuniting his soul is what saved the world before. So why does she have to die in order to save the world again? Was his sacrifice the only thing that was undone? And if so, why? How does this work? Whatever, man, let's just read the climax. Was his sacrifice the only thing that was undone? And if so, why was that the only thing that was undone? Whatever, man. Let's just read the epilogue. So Link makes another joke about killing Abraham, which proves that, again, everyone remembers the events of this book. And then Ethan drinks some chocolate milk and thinks about his lost loved ones. The end. Yeah, that's it. There's not much of a resolution here. Like, there's no indication that Ethan and Lena are going off to college together or anything like that. They're just back at the life they had before, and they're happy now. It feels almost like the authors forgot that the characters are supposed to have a life after the story ends. So Ridley is an odd character who I find just fascinating. You know, she's introduced as a dark mirror for Lena, as a warning for what'll happen if she goes dark. They grew up together, and then Ridley went dark and their relationship became strained. And it doesn't seem that bad, actually. For a minute in the first book, it seems like Ridley is evil because she's working with Seraphine, but then she spares Link's life, even though that puts herself at risk, and then she still comes to family dinners, so everyone still tolerates her, apparently? I don't know. She's just Lena's jerk cousin who works with her mom to undermine her life, and I think we all have one of those. Then in book 2, she's kind of their ally for a little while, and she does lose her magic while helping them save the day. So again, she's clearly not evil. She has a moral compass. She's just a jerk sometimes. Then in book 3, when she's lost her magic, you actually start feeling bad for her for a little while, because she's so defined by her powers that she doesn't know what to do with herself without them. Like, her entire identity is gone, and now she has to rebuild it. And instead of making a new one, she manipulates John into recreating a facsimile of her old self. She continues using magic with John as a surrogate, and she mostly just uses it to cause chaos for no reason. Like, remember, she does start a small riot at a high school party, which, reminder, Ridley is like 18 or 19 years old at this point, so the fact that she's at a high school party at all is weird and a little bit sad. Like, as far as metaphors for her trying to recapture the energy of her lost youth go, it is a bit on the nose. But she doesn't do anything really crazy with her pseudo-magic. She just wants to still have it. And then she loses that, and in book 4 she goes to Abraham of her own volition to try and get her magic back. She's taken prisoner, and then she's rescued, and that's it. There's nothing else for her after that. She doesn't do anything else of note the rest of the book. She doesn't get an end to her character arc, really, with the exception of her relationship with Link, because they seem to get on well, and even after book 1, they were flirting, and there was clearly something there with them, especially after Link got turned into an incubus. And she does seem to find him charming and fun. She just won't come out and say it in front of everybody. Then, in the last book, when she betrays her friends, and again goes to Abraham to try and get her powers back, she finally says that she cares for Link and she wants to be with him, but he rejects her. Like, very, very bluntly, he rejects her. Like, he still has feelings for her, but she's betrayed him too many times. She's betrayed all of them too many times. And honestly, good for Link. Like, you should have self-respect like that. Don't chase after someone who clearly doesn't respect you and mistreats you. But then that's it for Ridley. There's no real end to her arc. But this is such a weird moment because it gets almost no focus when it happens, and it never gets brought up again afterwards. Like, I straight up forgot about it until after I was going through my notes for making this video, and then I read it, and I was like, wait, does Link actually reject her? Do they, like, straight up break up there? And then I had to double check the Caster Chronicles fan wiki, and yes, they do break up. Link does straight up reject her, and they're not together anymore. So it feels like it should be a big moment, but it's so small that I, like, straight up forgot about it immediately after I finished reading. And then that's it for Ridley. There's no real end to her arc. Like, just Link doesn't like her anymore. And that is a very nothing moment. I need to mention that Ridley is a specific type of caster called a siren, which really just means that she's good at using magic to brainwash or manipulate people, and it's implied, not directly stated, it's implied that this has given her a bit of a complex, like she believes that she's unlovable and can only ever experience a facsimile of love by brainwashing people, and then when she lost her powers, she lost even that facsimile. So she feels that Link doesn't really love her, and I thought that she would slowly come around to realize that he actually does love her, and that other people actually do love her. She'd realize that going dark didn't force her to be evil, and that she can still do the right thing if she puts her mind to it. You know, she's not defined by her nature. Her family and Link and other people do love her, and while she's done some bad things, she doesn't really do anything in the books that is truly irredeemable. So while I am okay with the romance just ending badly for her, and I do kind of like that, again, like she mistreated people too many times and Link finally had enough, I do like that. The rest of her character still needed to wind up somewhere, though. Like, what is Ridley going to do after the events of the books? Is she still going to try and get her magic back? Has she accepted that she's immortal now? Is she supposed to be a dark mirror of Lena? Is her tale a tale of redemption? Like, there's a million directions you could take Ridley in, and these directions could be triumphant, or tragic, or comedic, but there's not a single word about it. All that time that gets wasted in the first 3 books, and very little of it is dedicated to Ridley, her journey, or her inner world. And then book 4 is much shorter, so she doesn't really get any time there either. Like, all the pieces are there for a fun, interesting, and possibly even deep character, but none of these pieces are assembled. Or, more accurately, only about half the pieces are assembled, so I can almost kind of see what they were going for, but then that's it. Like, I don't see any sort of finished product here. And Seraphine has much the same problem as Ridley, because sometimes she's the main antagonist of the entire story, and she is a lot like Ridley. Once she was a normal person, she got claimed by the Dark, and now she is vaguely evil. Like, we do see a few flashbacks from when she first turned dark, and it is heartbreaking because she got thrown out of her home and disowned by her family, despite not doing anything bad. So it seems like she just leaned into the whole evil bit, because people were gonna mistreat her either way, so she may as well just do what she wants. But then, that's kind of it. She dies, and then she pops up again for a single scene where she kills herself to help Ethan. And why did she kill herself? Did she do it because she genuinely wanted to help him? Like, was that her one last act of good? Did she think it was crueler to let him proceed on his journey? Was she only looking to commit suicide and she just wanted someone to witness her do it? Like, it's very ambiguous, but I don't know, I'm not opposed to things being ambiguous, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. Leaving character arcs unfinished is usually the wrong way to do that, especially when it ties into the character arc of the lead. Because Lena is terrified of going dark, and later she decides to be half light and half dark, you know, forging her own path, creating her own destiny, but being half dark changes absolutely nothing about her personality. Like, she doesn't have any urges to be greedy or cruel, she's just exactly the same as she was before. You know, maybe seeing her cousin overcome the dark would give her the courage she needs to deal with her own urges. Maybe seeing how far her mother fell would give her the motivation to never give in to her evil urges. Maybe she would see how being dark can ruin a relationship, and that would cause her to act in an overly appeasing way towards Ethan because she doesn't want to lose him. Like, again, the pieces are all there, but nobody assembled them.
He's fairly intelligent. He's full of shit!
Ultimately, Beautiful Creatures does absolutely nothing that we haven't seen a dozen times before. Like, it's a paranormal young adult romance from the late aughts and early 10s. If you've read any of those, you have read Beautiful Creatures. However, it's executing the same formula in a much more competent manner than the others, for the most part. I was absorbed in Ethan and Lena's relationship, as well as them as individuals. A lot of the side characters have definable personalities, and they're likable enough people. It feels like there is a world outside of the leads, and other than a lot of the magic stuff not making sense, the world is sometimes great. They just, again, they didn't think things through. Like, what does it mean to be a dark caster? How does any of this magic stuff work? Why do the casters bother hiding from humans? Shouldn't they have just taken over and ruled us thousands of years ago? just don't think about it. Like I said, I am kind of convinced that the authors wanted to write about vampires at first, but then they just added a few more magic powers and called it a day. But whatever the case, it is still better than the world building of most of these things. And that's basically how I feel about the Castor Chronicles overall. Like, it's better than most others like it. One sign that I personally use to determine if a book is interesting is whether or not I start imagining different versions of it in my head. Like, if I take some stuff from it and start thinking like, oh, it would have been cool if they went in a different direction with that, or maybe if this character tried this instead, it could have been cool, then to me at least, that means there's something compelling about it, even if it's not all that good. And for the Castor Chronicles, I wound up doing that a lot. Like, I kept imagining if Lena had been forced to truly choose between light and dark, and she chooses light, but because of that, half her family dies and she vows to break the curse so that this doesn't happen again. Or, what if she chooses dark, half her family dies, and she straight up swears revenge on someone for forcing her into that position? Either of those ideas would be neat, and if nothing else, I would read them to the end. I also found myself wishing that the Castor world was more fleshed out, and we got a better look at the eldritch horrors that are implied to be out there, but that would also make this a very different book series. And like I said earlier, Ethan noticing them and choosing not to think about it too much kind of adds to the cosmic horror angle. There are so many flaws in these books, but there are also so many chances to get better. But even without my hopes for this to get better, out of all the paranormal romances I've read, this is the best one. Even then, I would just say, yeah, it's good, I guess. I kind of liked it. But the only other ones I can think of that I've read that approach this level would be the Elemental series and the Sirena Legacy. But the Castor Chronicles is a little better than both of those. It's still not perfect, but I just liked it. And I do think that it's a great example of how lazy and uninspired so many other authors were back then. Because if those authors had done the same formula that everyone else was doing, and then they just applied basic writing advice to it, then their books could have been good. And Beautiful Creatures was a big success, if nothing else. Like, it sold very, very well. And it did get made into a movie. Like, none of the sequels got adapted, but hey, it got made into a movie, and that is farther than most make it, so let that be a lesson to all authors of shitty books that are coming out now. If you try, you can make something that you're proud of and makes money. Just a thought. Anyways, thanks again to World Anvil for sponsoring. Have a great day. Goodbye. Aloha! Thanks to everybody who watched this far. Do you see all these names here? I mean, if you're only listening in another tab and not watching, you probably don't see them, but if you are watching, you see all these names here. These are my patrons, and I want to give a special shout out to them, as well as my $10 and up patrons. 3 Cat Day, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Carolina Clay, Chaotic Entity 1, Chris Goldap, Hey It's Haley, Lexi Delorme, Lord Tiebreaker, Psych XS, Toa Michael, and Yunha Park. All of these people, their support means the world to me. And if you watch this at all, your support means the world to me too. If you want to help grow the channel and help support me further so I can keep doing this, don't forget to rate the video, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Or you can, become a patron or a channel member. You get early access to videos and bonus content. Starts at $1 a month. But, if you don't feel like doing that, no hard feelings, I guess. I just won't be able to eat without you. Or something like that. I don't know. Whatever. Have a nice day. Bye.